Genetic modification, a new name for an old process. GMO stands for genetically modified organism. A genetically modified organism is one that has undergone an addition or alteration to its DNA. Sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? What we're going to discover over the next few minutes is that while this concept might sound like a bad ending of a science fiction story, genetic modification of organisms is actually nothing new. Humans have been genetically modifying organisms for thousands of years, so the idea that GMOs are new is simply a myth. So, let's get started. Our story begins in 1996, when Dolly the sheep, the first mammal to be cloned, was born. This was 20 years ago. The field of genetics had already come a long way by this time, allowing Dolly to be created using a technique called somatic cell nuclear transfer. Around the same time, in 1995 to 1996, Roundup-ready soybeans were introduced for widespread cultivation in the U.S. Today, about 94% of soybeans grown in the U.S. are genetically modified. In 1983, plants that we traditionally think of as genetically modified were created. In a very short time frame, 3 separate research groups introduced bacterial genes into plants, and an additional group demonstrated that a bean gene could be inserted into a sunflower plant. Of course, even these plants weren't the beginning. 7 years before that, in 1976, the NIH created a set of guidelines that governed genetic modification research. Interestingly, those guidelines came over 100 years after Gregor Mendel published his work on selective breeding in pea plants. Much like the genetic engineering of today, Mendel had the goal of being able to select for certain phenotypic traits in pea plants. Mendel's work became the foundation of modern genetics. And here's something I bet you didn't know. While Gregor Mendel is best known for his work with plants, he also studied genetics in mice and bees. But even before that, Charles Darwin was busy observing genetic selection at work and publishing his findings in 1859 in The Origin of Species. Think that was the beginning? Think again. Humans have been selectively breeding agricultural crops to attain desirable traits for roughly 10,000 years. Yes, you heard that right, 10,000 years. The corn and wheat that you know today, whether you consider it GMO or not, would not exist if not for thousands of years of careful breeding by humans. Without selective breeding, you can also kiss bananas, watermelons, eggplant, carrots, and peaches goodbye. So it seems that as humans, we can't resist the urge to tinker with our food. Thousands of years before the first laboratories were invented, we were already creating the crops we wanted. Come to think of it, humans didn't stop at food. All this time we've been selectively breeding our companions as well. Most dog and cat breeds that we know today were achieved by careful selection and breeding. We even continue to breed dogs and cats for desirable traits today. So to say that the process of genetic modification is new just because it's been moved from the backyard into the laboratory is short-sighted. Whether the breeding takes place in a research facility, in Mendel's greenhouse, or in fields thousands of years ago, humans are selecting for the best traits to pass on to the next generation of crops. It's this long history of breeding that has allowed our planet to support as many people as it has, and it's also what will allow our population to grow even more in the future. The idea that genetic modification is brand new is simply a well-propagated myth.